Morning, Rabbi Shmuel. All right, Rabbi, say good morning. Good morning, a Gittin Chodesh. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Tammuz, Rab Naftali Tilson of Eretz Yisrael, for dedicating all the Shiurim and Drushos this month in honor of the yahrzeit of his dear parents, Rabbi Yonah ben Avram Leib, and Ishtam V'Yashar Oev Torah, and Rivka Bas Yaakov Niftra B'Keser Shem Tov, Chavalim Yisurim Kashim B'Mei HaShoah, and the merit of our Torah, the Neshamas should have an aliyah, and Meretz Hashem, we should all be zocha to finish the Daf Yomi cycle together. Incredible. Our week of learning sponsors, Binyamin Fleisch, memory of his father, Rabbi Shmuel Yudel ben Binyamin Yaakov, as well as Yehuda and Jenny Goodhart, Le'ilu Nishmas Yeshaya Zalman ben Laser. Our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Ira Miriam Grossman, creation of the yahrzeit of Miriam's father, Aryeh ben Moshe Zichron Livracha, and Baruch and Bracha Rifkin for the yahrzeit of Shalom Rifkin, Shalom ben Harav Ruven. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah and the families in a chamar. So with that, let us begin. A lot to do today, Baruch Hashem. Today's daf is Lamed Hey 35. We are picking up at the Mishnah on Lamed Daled Amud Beis 34b, and the Mishnah says as follows: Ein amana nizonis. We'll see a very interesting case. Ein amana nifras minichsei som ela b'shvua. An amana could only go ahead and collect. An amana could only go ahead and collect from the property of Yisomim with a shvua. So in other words, she wants to collect her ksuva. Ultimately, again, she could only collect from the estate with a shvua. Nimnu milashvia. However, at a certain point, they ultimately went. Now, also, what's the shvua? The shvua that she has to take is that she has not received any payment for her ksuva. So, in other words, so Rachel is married to Ruvain. Ruvain dies. Rachel now wants to collect her ksuva from the estate. So the halacha, she has to swear that she has not received anything from the estate, ultimately in satisfaction of her ksuva, in order for her to collect. Fine. So nimnu milashvia. However, they stopped. Chazal stopped administering the shvua. We'll see why. So Rabbi Gamliel Hazaki instituted instead that she should take a neder. In other words, what does it mean she take a neder? That instead of taking a shvua, essentially what the Yisomim could do is they could impose upon her a neder. For example, that they could say to her, you have to vow that if you did indeed receive any payment from the estate in satisfaction of your ksuva, you'll be prohibited to eat fruit for the rest of your life. Something like that. So to impose an neder upon her. So the Gemara says, and if she takes the neder, ultimately she collect her ksuva. Furthermore, witnesses sign on the get. As I will say, it's not enough for Eidei Mesira, but rather witnesses have to sign on the get. And all of this entire Mishnah, is Mipnei Tikkun HaOlam. The Hillel Hiskin Pruzbal, Mipnei Tikkun HaOlam. Hillel instituted the Pruzbal, which we referenced already again in last week's Shir a little bit. Right? Hillel, or Shabbos Shir. Hillel instituted Pruzbal, Mipnei Tikkun HaOlam, for the benefit of society. Good. We'll say a lot to unpack in this Mishnah. So Ma'ir Yamana. So we'll say, so remember again, so the Mishnah began by telling me the following halacha. An almana wants to collect her ksuva from the estate, from the Yisomim. The original halacha was, you can't collect from the Yisomim unless you take a shvua, unless you swear that you have not received any form of payment already from the estate. Rabbi Gamliel took away the shvua, replaced it with a neder. Says the Gemara, why are you limiting this to a case of almana? Afilu kuli almanami. The reality is, no one is allowed to collect from Yisomim without a shvua. Whenever you come to collect payment from the estate of orphans, lo yifra ella b'shvua. You always need a shvua. I'll say this is true in general. So this is true for an almana. This is true for a gerusha. This is true for creditors. If you want to collect money from orphans, from the estate of orphans, the only way to do so is with a shvua. This is what Chazal instituted in order to protect orphans. In order to protect, you can only collect money with a shvua. So the Gemara says, no. Amana tzrichale, it's tzrichale. The truth is, I need the case of Amana. Why? Sadai tchamina, I would have thought, top of lamed he mishuk china akilu barabanan. I might have thought that ultimately, again, because of china, Chazal were mekel by. So what's china? Rashi says, "Tap Rashi on Lamed Hamad Aleph 35a. She'ehei chen ha'anoshim be'eni ha'anoshim linasilehem." In other words, I might have thought that we should make marriage a good proposal for women. In other words, that we want women to want to get married. What's the way to ensure that women want to get married? Is to make them feel financially secure in the relationship. So I might have supposed to say, here's the problem. If a woman knows that in the event that she's widowed, the only way for her to collect her ksuva is for her to take a shvuah from the Yisomim, one might have thought that she might be a little bit more reticent to enter into the relationship. So perhaps I would have thought that let's relax the standards. The general, remember again, the general standard of collection from Yisomim is you need a shvuah. I might have thought that by Amana, we should relax that in order that she should feel more encouraged to engage in marriage. So the Gemara says, Kamash Malan, no. Kamash Malan, Mishnah teaches me that Amana is just like everyone else. And just like everyone else, if they want to collect ksuva, what do they have to do? From Yisomim, what do they have to do? They have to take a shvuah. Almana is no different, and she has to take a shvuah as well. Incredible. But the Rebbe said at a certain point they stopped the shvuah, right? They stopped having an almana take a shvuah. Why? My timer. So this is fascinating. Maybe it's because of Rav Kahana. What did Rav Kahana say? Rav Kahana listen to this, I will say. There was a story with a guy, B'sheni B'tzuras, and it was during a famine. Shehifkid dinar zahav etzel almana. He deposited a gold dinar with an almana. Deposited a gold dinar with an almana. I will say, now why is he depositing it with her? Ultimately, again, safekeeping. Safekeeping. What happens? V'hinichasa b'kad shel kemach. The almana placed the gold dinar in a jug of flour. In a jug of flour, just for safekeeping. The Rebbe says she forgot about it. Va'fa'asa bepas, she baked it into a loaf of bread. V'nasnasa la'ani, and she gave the loaf of bread to the ani. So unwittingly, without even realizing it, she went ahead and she gave away the dinar. Fine. Rebbe said Lamed Hamad Aleph 35a, 7 lines down. So what happens? So the owner of the dinar comes along. He says, listen, give me back my dinar. Give me back my dinar. Amrale, she says, now again, I will say, so the almana has no idea what happened to the dinar. Now, to be clear, she's not denying like the events. In other words, she's not denying that the dinar was deposited by her and that she owes it back. She says, I don't know what happened to it. And again, she swears, Amrale, Yene sam hamaves be'echa mibaneh shel ose isha im nehanisi midinarcha klum. Literally, she said, let one of my kids die if I derived any benefit from this dinar. So I'll say what she was saying was, I don't know what happened to it, but I just want to be clear. She was swearing, I did not get any benefit from this. That's the point that she was making over here. I don't know what happened. But I swear to you that I did not get any benefit from this dinar. And again, she wanted to make this point in such a dramatic way that literally she staked the life of one of her children on it. Amru, they said, Lo hayu yomim mu'atin ad shemeis echa mibaneha. It was only a matter of days until one of her children died. And I both say, now here's, so we'll see why this is in just a moment. I both say, when this story became known to Chazal, Amru, Mami shenishpa be'emes, kacha nishpa ala shakar alachas kama v'kama. I both say, this woman was swearing truthfully. If this is the penalty for swearing truthfully, then you can imagine the penalty for swearing falsely. Now the Gemara says, Umay tama'i ansha. So why was she punished? In other words, we'll say, what happened over here? Ishtarshi la makom dinar. Rabbi say she did benefit from the dinar. How did she benefit from the dinar, Rabbi say? Because remember again, she saved flour. How did she save flour? Because obviously, again, the dinar was baked into the loaf. the space that the dinar occupied was flour that she saved. So she swore that she did not get any benefit from the dinar. But in fact, she did get benefit from the dinar. So I will say, in essence, she swore falsely. She swore, again, unwittingly, right? Unknowingly, but Lamaisa, she swore falsely. So the Gemara says, Umay mishinishba be'emes. So I'll say, if that's the case, why does it say, if someone who swears truthfully, or she didn't swear truthfully, she swore falsely, rather the Gemara says, Kamishinishba be'emes. So what Chazal was saying is, here was someone who mamish thought, she thought, with her entire heart, that ultimately, again, she was swearing truthfully. But as Rabbi says, she wasn't. So we point over here as well, say we see how severely we have to treat a shavua. So I'll say, so this, if you see ultimately, again, this is someone who thought she was swearing truthfully, someone who thought ultimately, again, she was telling the truth, and yet we see the catastrophic consequences. So Gemara is suggesting over here, we'll say by the way, there's a lot in general to unpack in that story as well, how you see the power of our words, right? So, in other words, what is it that makes a shvua? What is it that makes a shvua so powerful? We'll say what a shvua represents, as a person says, the totality of my credibility is vested in my spoken word. That's what a shvua is, right? The totality of my credibility is in this oath. So literally, the totality of my koach hadibur, of my power of speech, is in this statement. And if you abuse that, if you swear falsely, then I will say what it fundamentally does is it fundamentally erodes the totality of the truthfulness of your koach hadibur. That's the power of a shvua. Now I will say, because we see that there can be catastrophic consequences from a shvua, even when there is not an intention to lie, so perhaps that's why Chazal took out the shvua from the almana. That's Gemara suggesting. So maybe over here we just don't want people taking shvuas. We just don't want people taking shvuas. So therefore, again, originally the halacha was, if an almana wanted to collect from the yisomim, ultimately, again, she has to take a shvua. But we see the catastrophic consequences of shvuas even when people are well-intentioned. So perhaps that's why they took out the shvua from the almana. If that's the case, my area almana feel grushanami. So say, if that's the case, then I don't understand. It should be, why is it only an almana who no longer takes a shvua? What about a grusha? Remember again, there could be a grusha case where a grusha has to take a shvua. Where does a grusha have to take a shvua? It's very simple. Reuven was married to Rachel. They got divorced. Now what happens? Reuven dies. Rachel still needs to collect her ksuva. Who is she collecting ksuva from? Who is she collecting it from? The Yisomim. So I would say, how does she collect the shvua? With an oath. So in other words, if that's the case, in other words, I hear this. What the Gemara is saying over here is maybe the reason Chazal stopped the concept of a shvua from Yisomim, maybe the reason they stopped it is because ultimately, again, the severity of shvua is too intense. But if that's the case, it's not just an almana who should no longer swear. Why don't we say anyone who has to collect from Yisomim shouldn't swear anymore? To which the Gemara says, Rabbi We'll say, yeah, we see explicitly Rabbi Zera says, we will still administer a shvua to a grusha who needs to collect from the Yisomim. To which the Gemara says, I'll tell you, Shiny, debahi hana dekatarcha kame diasmi asmi la ruye hetera. So I will say, this is very interesting. I will say, what are we concerned about over here? Right, at the end of the day, what do we, right, let's go through the case. Right, Reuven's married to Rachel. Reuven dies. Rachel wants to collect her ksuva. What's the mechanism? Who does she collect ksuva from? Who does she collect it from? Yisomim, orphans. The original halacha was what I will say, no problem. You want to collect from Yisomim, shavua, you have to swear. So I'll say, so suddenly we're saying, no, we don't want her to swear. What are we concerned about? I will say this fascinating. It's as follows. In the case of the almana, this is a woman who, especially if we're dealing with minor orphans, right? Yisomim who are children, she has exerted. So let's take a step back. I'm sorry. So in general, she wants to collect her ksuva from the Yisomim. Why does she have to swear? Why does she have to swear? What are we concerned about? Right? We're concerned about previous collection. That's what we're concerned about, right? That maybe she was already paid. Right? Maybe she, not in full. In other words, maybe during Reuven's lifetime, he went ahead and he gave her a bar of gold. And he said, Rachel, I love you. This is payment for your ksuva. Whole payment, partial payment. That's what we're concerned about. And now that Reuven's dead, what we have to be concerned about is Rachel trying to collect again from the estate? So a shvua is the mechanism by which we ensure she's not trying to double dip over here. So now we're saying we have to take out the shvua. We'll say why. By Na'amana specifically, what we're concerned about, we'll say, is that she's going to be what's called mora heter. We'll say, what does it mean, mora heter? Mora heter means you justify something to yourself. That she can say to herself, you know what? I did receive money from Reuven during the marriage, but you know what? That was really money that I was entitled to because I take really good care of this family. Right? I take good care of this, which she is entitled to. Right? In other words, I take really good care of this family. So therefore, that money, that wasn't ksuva money. That was hakaras hatov money, right? That was gratitude money. That was family rearing money. That was the fact that I work, overtime on behalf of this mishpacha. But now I'm really entitled to my entire ksuva. So we'll say what we're concerned about is that she could justify the fact that even though she received money during the lifetime of her husband, she won't count that as ksuva, and she'll say, I'm really entitled to the ksuva in its entirety now. And what we're scared of is she'll convince herself of this and take a shvua. Even though what Rabbi say, it's really a false shvua. But people are capable of convincing themselves of all kinds of things and turning falsehoods into truths. Look at Rashi. Rashi says, Asya la urei hatera. Rashi says, Bedavra muat. Now, we'll say, obviously, this works best if, let's say, she received a relatively minimal amount of money during the marriage. She'll convince herself that wasn't ksuva, that was just ultimately against schar tircha, that was hakaras hatov money for everything I do for the family. So because we are concerned, we'll say, by the way, I just want to point out, you see from here how we have the ability to convince ourselves of things that are simply not true. Well, we all do this, right? You tell yourself saying that's not true. In the beginning, I know that it's not true. And then something amazing happens, which is what? Repeat it enough times, right? Over and over, and create enough justifications, and suddenly it actually becomes true. And if you're really good, then over time, not only is it true, but what? It's a mitzvah. And not only is it a mitzvah, but if you're really good, it's a da'oraisa, right? And if you're really excellent over time, it becomes a halacha l'Moshe misinai. In other words, I will say this is the power we have of justification. And it's so powerful that Chazal were actually concerned that a woman may come to take a shvuah based on this justification. And as the story pointed out before, that could have catastrophic consequences. As a result, Chazal went ahead and removed the shvuah, but dafka by Amana. See, it's Amana who has this justification because she's involved in the child rearing, in the raising of the family, a justification that necessarily the Grusha would not necessarily have. Incredible. So, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Bar Abba, so Bar Abba, Rav Shmuel Silber, Lo Shana El Bebezdin. We'll say, when do we say that we don't administer a shvuah to an almana? That's only in Beis Din. I will say, a shvuah in Beis Din, Rashi points out, has what's called nikitas chevetz. You take an object, a ritual object, a sefer Torah, a pair of tefillin, and you swear over the object. However, aval chutz leBeis Din mashpia nosa. But outside of Beis Din, which is only what we call a shvuah dirabanan, ultimately, again, we can go ahead and administer a shvuah to an almana. So we'll say Rav and Shmuel are suggesting that when Chazal said that an almana no longer takes a shvuah, that's only a shvuah in a Beis Din, which is a shvuah over an object, which is a shvuah d'oraisa. But you can still administer to a shvuah d'rabbanan outside of Beis Din. Ini, is that so? Yet Rav would be unable to go ahead and collect the ksuah for an almana. See, I will say what we're going to see is as follows. There apparently was a period of time between when they stopped administering a shvuah to an almana and when they started with the neder of Rabbi Gamliel. Now I will say what happened during that time. This is actually incredible. An almana would be stuck. She wouldn't get a ksuva. And I will say there's a way to remedy that. How do you remedy that? Give the almana property during her lifetime, during the husband's lifetime, that is set aside for ksuva collection. Right? So we call that an apotiki. right? But again, so there was a point in time where ultimately again an almana would be stuck. So Rav would not go ahead and collect the ksuva for an almana. So kasha, that's the question. So with Sur Masni Achi, Rabbi saying in Surah they had the following version. Benarda Masni Achi. So in Narda they said the following. Amar Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Lo Shan Al Beis Din. This is when do we say that you can't administer a shvuah to an almana? That's only in Beis Din. Aval chutz the Beis Din, but outside of Beis Din, mashpia nosa, you could administer a shvuah first. So I'll say so again. In this version, the Narda version, they said about say that halacha l'maisa. When do we say that we do not allow an almana to take a shvuah? Based on the fact that we are concerned she's going to lie, based on her personal justifications, that's only a shavua d'oraisa in Beis Din. But we can administer to her a shavua midrabanan outside of Beis Din. Rav says, afila Beis Din nami mashbiinosa. Rav says, no, you can't even give her a shavua outside of Beis Din. The Gemara's Rav Latame, Rav goes according to his reasoning. The Rav lo magbik ksuva la armalta. Rav would not collect the ksuva for an almana because Rav felt there is no way, there is no mechanism. Once we stopped allowing an almana to take a shavua, unfortunately, she is unable to collect her ksuva. But Gemara says, 1 second. But 1 second. But we just said, why not have her take a neder? In other words, Rabbi says the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, fine. We can't. So Rabbi said, let's just trace the progression of the halacha. What's the first step of the halacha? The halacha is, if you want to collect from Yisomim, you need to take a shavua. Why do you have to take a shavua? Why? It's yasam protection. It's orphan protection. Rabbi said, remember again, this goes back to the idea that orphans don't know the matters of the estate of their father. Right? So what happens? You got people knocking on the door saying, your father owed me money. So again, Yisomim don't know. So Beis Din, in order to protect the interests of the Yisomim, say, if you want to collect from Yisomim, you need to take an oath. Now, both say that applies to everyone. So that which means now, Reuven was married to Rachel. Reuven died, left behind an estate. Rachel wants her ksuva. So what does Rachel need to do? Shvuah. Okay? Then Chazal stepped in and said, no, Almana, you can't take a shvuah. You can't take a shvuah. Why do we prevent the almana from taking a shvuah? Why? Apparently, a heightened probability of her lying. Not intentionally lying, but justified lying. Justified. And apparently, there was such a significant concern that Chazal felt the need to legislate. But 1 second. But say, now what's our problem? An almana can't collect her ksuva. No, we have an answer to that. What's the answer? Neder, that essentially the Yisomim or the estate can impose a neder upon the almana. Almana, you have to vow that you will never get benefit from bread again if you went ahead and received any money from your ksuva. Okay? So I would say, so now you have a mechanism that allows her to collect ksuva, but also allows the estate to know that she hasn't gotten paid anything. So the Gemara says, so now let's go back to our case. The Gemara says, Rav would not allow an almana to collect her ksuva. Why? Because since she couldn't take a shvuah, he wouldn't let her collect. But says the Gemara, well, I don't understand. V'li adre, v'ligbei. Rav, let her take a neder. Okay, you don't want to let her take a shvuah, that's fine, but let her take a neder, and as a result of the neder, she could collect her ksuva. B'shani derav kili nidre. In the years of Rav, in the time of Rav, people treated nedarim very lightly. So we'll say, so taking a neder was no longer a deterrent to lying. So we'll say it's actually just a little bit of a historical lesson. Apparently, in the days of Rav, an almana literally wasn't able to collect her ksuva. We wouldn't let her take a shvuah because out of a concern of lying, and nedarim didn't work because people trampled upon the sanctity of nedarim. Incredible. So the Gemara tells a story. That's the command of Rav Huna. So we'll say there was a woman who came before an almana who came before Rav Huna, who wanted to collect her ksuva. Amar, he said to her, Ma'i avid lech, what am I supposed to do for you? The Rav lo magbi ksuva la armalta. Rav would not allow an almana to collect her ksuva. Ultimately, again, because she can't take a shvuah, and she can't take a neder. So Amar, Midihu taima ela dilma naktina midi miksuvasi. So I'll say, so the almana said back to Rav Huna. She said, "Don't worry about." In other words, why didn't Rav go ahead and let an almana take a shvuah out of a concern that maybe the almana got paid from some of her ksuva. She said, Chai Hashem Tzavakos, im nehanesi miksuvasi klum. And we'll say, what does she do? This is incredible. What does this almana do? She swears, Chai Hashem Tzavakos, I swear by God, I never received anything. So we'll say, what did she just do? She just took a shvua. So Rav Huna, moderat b'kofetzes. Rav, I will say, agreed in a case of kofetzes. I will say, what does kofetzes literally mean? Kofetzes literally means jump. So I will say, Rav agreed. See, this is fascinating. So I will say, Halacha tells us we don't administer a shvua to an almana. However, if the almana of her own volition swears, we take her at her word. I was about to say, that's kofetzes. In other words, if she just takes a shvua, then halacha l'maisa, we're not going to discount that, we're not going to ignore that, and we accept that ultimately again as a proper shvua. So that's called the case of kofetzes. Another story. So we'll say there's a woman that came before Rabbi Bar Huna, an almana. Amrullah, she wants to collect her ksuva. And Rabbi says to her, Ma'i avidlach de Rav lo magbig ksuvas la armalta. Ultimately, again, so again, Rabbi says to her, I don't know what I'm supposed to do for you. After all, again, Rav did not allow an almana to collect the ksuva with a shvua. Furthermore, Abamari lo miagbi ksuva sala amalta, and Abamari also didn't allow collection of a ksuva. Amrullah, she said to him, fine, havli mizoni. So we'll say, so the almana says to Rabba, I'm sorry. Rabba. So ultimately, again, so the almana says to Rabba, fine, if you're not going to give me my ksuva, give me mizonos. Right? In other words, I want to remember again, an almana is entitled to support from the estate, right? So she says, fine, if you're not going to give my ksuva, give me mizonos. Amrullah, Rabba says to her, mizoni namalesech. No, I can't give you mizonos either. Why? Dam Rabbi Shmuel, hatovas ksuvas Beis Din ein la mizonos. Once a woman claims her ksuva in Beis Din, she loses the right to support. I will say, the logic behind it is as follows. It's actually very interesting. In general, a woman would only claim her ksuva when she was ready to get remarried. So I will say, from an almana perspective, there's no need to collect your ksuva when you have no intention of getting remarried. Why? Because you receive support. You're receiving mizonos. You're getting supported anyway, right? The only time a woman claims ksuva is when she wants that lump sum payment because she's getting remarried. And once she gets remarried, anyway, mizonos start. So I will say there's an interesting halacha. Therefore, once a woman claims her ksuva in Beis Din, so mizonos stops. So I will say, now watch this. So now this almana comes to Rabba. She says to him, I want to get my ksuva. He says to her, I'm sorry, I can't help you, because again, Rav said an almana can't go ahead and take a shvua. And also in the days of Rav, a neder wasn't effective either. So he says, I'm so sorry, I can't help you. She says, fine, so give me mizonos. He says to her, can't give you mizonos either, because you just claimed your ksuva in Beis Din. So I say she didn't take this well. Amrale, afchol lekorsei, your chair should be overturned. Now, what your chair should be overturned is a euphemistic way of saying you should die. You should die. Why? Because kebeit shrei avaratali, you're being machmir on me in two ways. In other words, this poor woman, she's saying, "What are you doing? What are you doing, Rabbi?" I said, now you're putting me at a dead end. So now I can't get my ksuva, and now I can't get mizonos. So where am I supposed to get support from? So I'll say, so essentially when she says you should die, what she's saying is what should happen, what you're sentencing me to should happen to you. I'm going to die, right? I have no money. I have no ksuva. I have no mizonos. So if this is what's going to happen to me, the same thing should happen to you. So we'll say, when the Talmidim of Rabbah heard this, so we'll say ultimately what the students did, we'll say, right after hearing this curse, they took his chair, they overturned it, and then they turned it back over. As well say, so Rabbi Bar Huna just got a very serious curse from this woman. So they tried to find actualization of the curse by actually turning over his chair. Right? So they turned it over, then they turned it upright. Nevertheless, Rabbi Bar Huna did not escape illness. I will say, by the way, you begin to see a theme over here also of the power of words. The power of words, the power of a shvua, the power ultimately again of a klala, power of words. Amar li Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yirmiyah Bira. You also see over here that when the posek paskins halacha, how there is a need to do so with sensitivity for the petitioner. Right? You say it is the job of the Rav or the job of the posek ultimately to find an eitzah. It's always easy to say aser. Right? Aser is always easy, and sometimes the answer is aser. But even when the answer is aser, ultimately, again, there has to be a way to help the person navigate forward. That is the responsibility, ultimately, again, of the Rav of the posek. Again, my answer might be aser, but then figure out an eitzah for this. And the frustration of this woman in this situation was, you're not helping me. Okay, fine. I can't do this. I can't do it. But what can I do? Where is my support supposed to come from? And as a result of feeling that ultimately, again, every single door is just simply being shut in her face, so she becomes frustrated. I will say people say sometimes very terrible things in moments of frustration, but she's saying essentially, you've relegated me to death. So if that's what's going to happen to me, that's what should happen to you. Very profound story. Well, listen to this. Rabbi Yehuda said to Rabbi Yirmiyah, here's what I want you to do. If an almana wants to collect her ksuva, here are the ways she could do so. In Beis Din, she can't take a shvuah. Right? That's our Mishnah. No more shvuah for an almana in Beis Din. But what can she do in Beis Din? What can she do in Beis Din? A neder. So she can either take a neder in Beis Din or she can take a shavua out of Beis Din. Abba says what we said before. What does it mean out of Beis Din? Let's remember again, a shavua out of Beis Din is what type of shavua? What type of shavua? A shavua midrabanan. Right? Remember again, what the Mishnah said is, a woman, an almana, cannot take a shavua in Beis Din to collect for her ksuva out of a significant concern that she is going to lie. She's going to lie. So therefore, again, in Beis Din, she could avail herself of the mechanism of Rabbi Gamliel to take a neder. Take a neder that she has not received any payment. Ultimately, again, or she could take a shvuah out of Beis Din. So Rav Yehuda says to Rabbi Yirmiyah, I want you to go teach and implement this halacha, and I want to hear that this is what is being practiced. But let's say, so again, so based on what we're saying right now, an almana has two ways in which she could collect her ksuva from the yisomim. If she's collecting in Beis Din, she could take a neder. Right? She could say, I vow never to eat bread again if I received any prepayment for my ksuva. And then we allow her to collect. Outside of Beis Din, where it is quote unquote only a shvuah d'Rabbanan, not a shvuah d'oraisa, she could even swear that she did not receive any form of prepayment, and that would allow her to collect the ksuva. Fine. So go for Rabbi Shmuel, lo shana ela almana. This is only true almana, aval grusha, mashpien also. But ultimately, again, we'll say grusha, you can make her swear. In other words, we'll say, so by grusha, if a grusha comes to collect her ksuva from Yisomim, right? Reuven's married to Rachel. Then what happens? They get divorced. And what happens? Before Rachel gets a chance to collect her ksuva, Reuven dies. Now Rachel shows up in Beis Din, and she wants to collect her ksuva. What's the halacha? We could administer an oath to her. Now we'll say, what's the logic of that? The logic seems to be that it's only an almana who will justify prepayment as non-ksuva payment, as schar for also being betapel, taking care of the kids all of these years since her husband died. A grusha doesn't have that level of justification, and therefore when a grusha shows up in Beis Din, and wants payment for a ksuva, we allow her to go ahead and swear. So now the Gemara asks, ugrusha dadralo. So we'll say, this sounds like, what sounds like what you're saying is that administering a neder to a grusha would not work. But is that true? But they sent from there, plonisa bas ploni, so-and-so, the daughter of so-and-so, kabilas kita minyada da achar bahedja, received the get from achar bahedja, the miskeri ayamari, who's also known as ayamari. That's a shout out to yesterday's daf, right? Also known as ayamari. V'nadart v'asart perisha ba'olam Allah, to lo kabilas miksuvasa. So we'll say what happens. She came to Beis Din. She got a get. She came to Beis Din. She wanted to collect her ksuva. What did we do in Beis Din? She took a neder, and she said essentially, all the fruits in the world should be usher to me if I received any form of prepayment for my ksuva, besides glufkara echad, one coat, v'sefer Tehillim echad, and one sefer Tehillim, v'sefer Eov, and a sefer Eov, umemshalas beluim, and a worn out sefer Mishlei. Worn out sefer Mishlei, and both say Amud Beis, v'shamnum b'chamisha mana. And ultimately, again, the value of all of those items was 5 mana. So we'll say, so essentially what she's doing over here is this Grusha is saying, I did receive some things. I did receive those things, right? I got a coat, I got a sefer Tehillim, I got a sefer Eov, I have a worn out Mishlei, right? So these are all items that I did receive as forms of prepayment. They evaluated those amounts. It came out that it was 5 mana. And when this woman comes before you, allow her to collect the rest of her ksuva. Now I will say, what's happening over here? This is a case of a grusha, a case of a divorcee. And how is she collecting her ksuva, the remainder of her ksuva? With a neder. So what do you see from here? You see from here that neder doesn't only work for almana, but neder also works for grusha. Ravashi, hahu get yavmin haba. Then Rabbi say that was a get yavmin. That was a yibum case. Was a yibum case. Rabbi say this was a case of where the woman in question was waiting for yibum. And one of these surviving brothers gave her a get. Rabbi say, what's the halacha ultimately again when a Yavama gets a get? I will say, what happens when a Yavama gets a get? A get doesn't do anything. But midrabanan, what it says is, you can no longer do Yibum. You no longer do Yibum. That's what a get does. Because remember again, by Yibum, you either do Yibum or Chalitza. Those are your options. There's no get. So midrabanan, if one of the surviving brothers gives her a get, what that does is that shuts down the possibility for Yibum and mandates chalitza. We'll say that's the case over here. Therefore, again, this is actually a case of a widow receiving payment for her ksuva, and that's why, again, the neder worked. So I will say, so bottom line, what the Gemara seems to be coming out with is like this: that Namana here. So I will say, let's just trace very quickly. Let's trace what we know. What I know is, in general, if you want to collect from Yisomim, you can only do so through a shvua. Therefore, again, when Reuven is married to Rachel, Reuven dies. Rachel wants to collect her ksuba from the estate of her late husband, should require a shvua. Chazal stepped in and said, Na'amana can't take a shvua. What are we concerned about? That she's going to justify lying on the shvua. That maybe she did receive prepayment for the ksuva, but she's going to say that wasn't ksuva money, that was child-rearing money, that was akaras hatov money. And she's going to justify taking an oath saying she never received ksuva payment, when in fact she did. So what do we do for her? We take shvua off the table. What did Rabbi Gamliel replace it with? Neder. She could vow. I will prohibit bread for the rest of my life upon me if I received any level of prepayment for the ksuva. If she takes that vow, I'll pay her out. One more piece the Gemara seems to introduce is another possibility is she could also take a shvua where? Outside of Beis, because that's a shvua midrabanan. Good, let's go weiter. Here's Rabbi Gamliel Zak Sheteno Daris. Rabbi Gamliel Zak institute that she should take a neder. So Amar Rav Huna lo shana ela b'shelo nises. Oh, we'll say, watch this. When do we say that a neder works for a collection of her ksuva? That's only if she did not yet remarry. Aval nises in madirin also. But ultimately, we'll say if she got remarried, so then ultimately a neder is not going to be a valid mechanism for her to collect her ksuva from her first marriage. Why not? So it says, nises my taima to mefer lebal. Oh, we'll say, because what could happen? Watch this. We'll say, so now she's going to show up in Beis, right? So Rachel was married to Reuven. Reuven died. Now let's say Rachel gets remarried, right? She marries Shimon, and now she never collected her ksuva from her first marriage. So she goes to Beis, wants to collect her ksuva, so Shavua is no longer on the table. So we say, fine, let her take a neder. Neder is not going to work in a case where she remarried. Why, Rabbi? So what are we concerned about? Because Rachel takes the neder, right? I'm never going to eat fruit again if I got any prepayment for the ksuva. She knows she's making a false neder. But we'll say, no problem. Why not? She goes home to Shimon, and her husband can revoke the neder for her. So neder is only effective if she has not remarried. But if she's remarried, ultimately neder won't work. So if that's the case, kilo nises nami lechimin saba mefer labal. So I'll say, but one second, you can say the same thing. In other words, even if she's not married now, shouldn't we be concerned that when she does get remarried, or if she does get remarried, or when she does get remarried, husband could be mefer the neder then? To which the Gemara says, no. So we learn this, ein habal mefer v'kodmin. We'll say a husband doesn't have the ability to annul nidarim that his wife took before their marriage. He only has the ability to annul nidarim that took place during the marriage. Shouldn't we be concerned about, say, even in the case she didn't get remarried, that there's still a possibility of revocation? After all, we'll say, what could she do? She can go to a Talmid Chacham. She go to a Talmid Chacham, and Talmid Chacham ultimately again could go ahead and revoke the neder for her. Because we hold that what? That before a woman has the neder revoked, what does she have to do? She has to explicitly detail the neder. So we'll say, she's going to show up to the Chacham. She's going to say, right, so we'll just play out this scene. She comes to the Chacham. Chacham says, yes, how could I help you? She says, I'd like to have a neder annulled. Right? He says, so no problem. What's the neder? She's going to tell the neder. And what is he going to say? What is he going to say? Sorry, I can't help you. I can't annul that neder. So because she has to articulate it, therefore, again, she's never going to get annulled. Rav Nachman Amar Afilu Nises. So we'll say, the truth is, Rav Nachman says, even if she got remarried, halacha l'maisa, you can go ahead and have her collect her ksuba with a neder. Nises vaday mefer labal. But once like we just said before, that a neder is going to be ineffective. Why? Because she could take the neder, then I will say, what could happen? Her husband could annul it for her. So how is that a mechanism to ensure that she's not lying about having received prepayment for a ksuba? To which the Gemara says, "Demadrina le barabim." Very interesting. We'll say, what do we do? What do we do? We administer the neder in public. Rashi says, "Barabim noderes bifnei asara v'kasavar neder shehoda barabim ein lo hafara." We'll say we administer this neder in public. Public means over here in front of 10 people, and this particular opinion holder will say that a neder that is done publicly has no revocation. Meisvei, so we'll say meisvei nises govek suvasa im nadra. So we'll say the Brisa says that what? If a widow remarries, or for that, right, someone remarries, ultimately again she could collect her ksuva if she makes a neder. My love nadra hashta, is it not saying that she's making a neder? I will say after she's gotten remarried, and you see from here that halacha l'maisa, it works to go ahead and make a neder even once she remarries. To which the Gemara says, lo de nadra meikara. No, what's the case of Osai? The case over here is halacha l'maisa. She made the neder before she got remarried. So v'hatanya nises noderes v'govek suvasa. So Osai, but it says over here, it says in the Brisa that if she remarried and takes a neder, she can collect her ksuva. To which the Gemara says tanaihi. So I'll say ultimately what's this? So we'll say here's the machlokes. So we'll say so we're dealing with a very specific case over here where halacha l'maisa, right? Rachel was married to Ruvain. Ruvain died. So I will say, so now we've already established, right, before she gets married, she can't take a shvuah, but she cannot take a shvuah, but she can take a neder. Then I will say the shaila is, she remarried. What options does she have for ksuva repayment? So about ksuva payment. So I'll say, what's our concern? So I'll say, no problem, still take a neder. What's our concern about? Say, what's our concern if she takes a neder? Her new husband number 2, can revoke the neder. Shabbos says, the Gemara says, Tanaihi. Shabbos says, so I'm sorry, before we get to that, seems to be, we have an answer. What's our answer? Our answer is, make her take a neder in public. Because apparently, a neder taken in public cannot be revoked. And therefore, the husband will have no power. That Tush Gemara says, Tanai. And we have this machlokes Tanaim. The ikalam damer neder shoda berabim yesh la afara. The ikalam damer neder. The ikalam damer ein lo afara. Rabbi say this is a machlokes. What's the machlokes? The machlokes is about neder shehudar berabim. If you have a neder made in public, a jurite taken in public, can that be annulled or not? Rabbi say that is a machlokes tanoim. That's machlokes tanaim, and therefore Rabbi say the ramifications of that machlokes ultimately again are going to govern how we deal with a woman who has remarried with ksuva collection. If you hold that neder shuda barabim cannot be annulled, great. Let her take the neder, and new husband can't go ahead and annul it. If you hold it can be annulled, Rabbi say, so what is the mechanism for ksuva collection for a woman who has remarried? Emirat Rabbi say to be continued tomorrow. Shkoyach. All right, have a great day, everyone.